Coming to you from Egyptology, Washington, D.C. The Washington, D.C. Mall is built off of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. As above, so below. Pyramids and sphinxes and iconography abound. The skeletal remains of every dead civilization on the face of the earth. When I look around my hometown and I see the decapitated heads decorating buildings, on shields and conquered heroes and the Green Man and all those other faces that are down there with all those naked breasts and genitalia hanging in your face in effigy, and granite, stone, concrete, steel, whatever's available. We live off of mud and clay and rusting hulks of metal. Most of our buildings are iron mixed with miry clay. And you see sphinxes and Roman architecture, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns, and Assyrian, Babylonian, even Central American. There's ziggurats all over the city and statues to any and everything. They've even got this huge decapitated head of Albert Einstein. So there's a lot of that going on in this city. Boys' clubs and secret clubs and people going from cave to celebrate just about anything to raise a glass to. So there's a lot of carousing and groups of orientation. And growing up in the midst of this is no cakewalk. In ninth grade, we went through a process that public schools don't go through because of being in a religious school, Catholic school. So our curriculum went from kindergarten to eighth grade, and then we went to high school. There's no middle school. And in high school, you're dealing with grown men pretty much because the seniors are all 18, 17, 18, going on 19, so they're considered grown men. And my brother was a senior, and being at odds growing up with the hostility that I grew up with in the neighborhoods and the program and the programming, having a single mother, I grew up with a very hostile brother. And so most of the time, him being the eldest, 3 years older, and no father, being the youngest you get, I guess whatever rolls downhill. So whatever frustrations and anguish and hostilities he had were taken out on me. Imagine being sound asleep and having someone pick up one side of your bed and literally throw it up in the air and you with it until you are actually landing on the floor with your bed on top of you and the frame and box spring. And you get an idea of what I came home to. I'm not trying to make the guy famous. At the same time, I'm not trying to ruin his life either. But the idea is coming home wasn't attractive between alcoholics asleep at the front door that were banging on our ceiling, their floor, all night, screaming my mom's name in hatred. I can't even remember how many years of that. It's like 8 years, 9 years of that. Coming home to a drunk upstairs and drunken parties downstairs in the basement. This is what you live through in a crime ridden, impoverished neighborhood, juxtaposed lower middle class, middle class, and gangs that burned down Washington, D.C. So it was a precarious little gauntlet set up for me to live through. Um, couldn't come home, barely could make it in and out of the neighborhoods. And if you weren't for them, you were against them. So it was sort of a very thin line to walk between the law, truant officers, disciplinary action. They could actually beat us at school or humiliate us. I was humiliated a lot, made to stand in the corner in front of class and then had things thrown at me at recess for being stupid and punished. And then coming home to beats. So I spent a lot of time down at the Smithsonian's. My mother got me tutors and mentors and those doors and that. But it was really weird because of the fact that I was in a very undisciplined crowd. Uh, in ninth grade, we had this priest who wore this long robe with this demi cape. And his name, I'll never forget his name. His name was Father Fenton. He looked like Spiro T. Agnew, like he was his twin brother. I've got a good eye for an artist. So, being an artist, you have to have a good eye. You have to know if a person's face is lopsided when you're drawing it or something like that. Sometimes you draw their face better than it looks. So, I had a good eye. I know faces, and this guy's face, he looked just like Spiro T. Agnew. Now, we were 11, 12 years old in ninth grade. Every time this priest turned around to write on the board, this was English class. Everybody, and I mean, almost without exception, everybody in the class started screaming and yelling and calling him pops and pretending there were cartoons on television. There was this cartoon called Gulliver's Travel, and there was this guy in the cartoon who was the pessimist, and he always was saying, "We'll never make it. We're not going to survive. We're going to die," and things like that. And every time this priest turned around and wrote on the blackboard for our lesson, someone would throw a balled up piece of paper at the board or scream out pops. And he talked like this cartoon character almost. The way he talked, he was like, "Gentlemen, we're not going to do this. If you can't find a way to behave, we're going to have to send you to the office." And then he'd turn around and write on the blackboard again, and someone would just go, "Ah!" And then someone would go, "Pops!" And everybody would just start laughing in the class. I mean, it never it never seemed like we made it through class. I don't know how we made it through that class. Even I was in on it, and it was infectious. It was like you couldn't. It was so hilarious. It was something that everybody looked forward to. I got thrown out of class at least 3 times, and another guy in my class got thrown out because back then I was into ventriloquism and things like that. And I could actually throw my voice. And I made my voice bounce off the wall on his side of the classroom back in the corner because I projected it back there. And this kid swore up and down that it wasn't him. And um, Mr. Fenton, our priest, he was saying, throwing this kid out of the class, and the kid was like, "I didn't say it. That was Lewis. Lewis did it. He can throw his voice." And he looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, sir, but you have to leave." And he threw this 12-year-old kid out of the class, and the kid had to go to the office. I mean, we were absolutely off the hook. The the senior upperclassmen, our uniforms were gold shirts, green ties, like a forest green, green blazers and green slacks. That was our uniform. It was hideous. Can you imagine walking through the city wearing gold? A gold shirt, and the rest of you is green. Everything else is green except for your shoes. Thank God. That was our uniform. We were living targets for any kid in that neighborhood. And the incinerator was right down the hill. Catholic University was in the other direction. And at the bottom of the hill from our school was where the kids raced along the railroad tracks with all the muscle cars, Mustangs, Roadrunners, Cobra GT, stuff like that. So we were like in the heart of, hey, come and beat me up. I mean, that's basically what our uniforms were saying. So my first year at this school, Archbishop John Carroll, the upperclassmen came to school wearing counterculture. I mean, they had plaid shirts on with bow ties and neckties and sweaters. Some kid wore a pink tutu or something like that. I mean, they were protesting the uniform, and they said basically that they couldn't take it anymore and that they were going to change this policy. And they did it. They walked out of class. I remember being in algebra class with this teacher who used to jack kids up in the corner. If you acted like the way we did in Mr. Fenton's class, this teacher would put you in the corner and punch you in the chest. I'm not kidding. I'm not going to say his name because, they're digging up people's past to hold against them now in some revolution. They might dig up Mark Twain and hold trial on his bones or something. But back then, some of our lay teachers, the men, they didn't take anything from anybody. I mean, and we had kids in my class that were 6 foot tall, weighed almost 200 pounds. The first play of our first game against, I can't remember, it was Good Counsel or something. When they sacked the quarterback, they broke his collarbone. We had huge kids in my class. I mean, these kids were huge. And we were only 11 and 12 years old. I was 4'11 and 3/4. These kids walked out of class into the bleachers and sat down and protested against the uniform. And that year, the uniform code changed. We didn't have to wear green and gold ever again. They changed the policy. We could wear slacks, a nice shirt, and a tie, but we had to wear a tie and a sweater or blazer. But I'll never forget that my first year in high school was the most frightening year. I thought gangs were frightening. Being in a Catholic high school, man, around grown men and priests and the curriculum and the dictums that they had, I mean, it was necessary, I think, because the kids were out of control. I mean, I saw how the kids acted in my English class when Mr. Fenton turned around and wrote on the blackboard. Something had to strap us in and get us ready for the long haul. Otherwise, we were not going to make it because they jacked a kid up in the shower after gym and were threatening to do me next. And I told them to bring it on. I had to fight. I was 4'11 and 3/4. I was one of the managers of our freshman football team. I had to fight kids that were twice my size almost and heavier than I was. I mean, like 5'6" around. They jacked a kid up in the shower. I'm not going to say everything they did to him, but they told me from like 5 feet away I was next. I was like, bring it. I don't even care because it was so out of control. Walking into a crowd of kids swinging was no big deal. I mean, they were messing with kids in the hall, talking about who they were going to jack up after school, and God help our biology teacher. She had her hands full. She had to scream the entire time we were in class because the whole class was just talking to each other and yelling at each other. I swear to you, I don't even know how we made it through the year, freshman year. Most of that year, I don't even remember. It was a blur because we were just so out of control.